r/Askreddit by Robotainment. African proverb says the child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down. To feel the warmth, what time in your life have you been closest to starting the fire? Wife was a senior staff for a local science fiction convention. Not only was she an unpaid volunteer, she had to take a vacation day off work and pay for her hotel room and parking on the morning that the convention started. She was setting up the first of the 3 rooms she was responsible for: manual labor, moving tables, setting up shelves, and loading them with stuff. And somebody came in, took her badge off her desk, and brought it to the convention's lost and found convention. LF lady told wife that lost badges have a $5 fee. To get them back, wife looked at the badge, looked at her, and said, "Keep it and going home, have a nice convention." Wife was about 25 feet down the hall when LF lady caught up to her and returned her badge. Wow, it was like they were trying to burn down their own village at that point. I had a coworker at a non-commission based retail job where a coworker would repeatedly sabotage my sales so she could get a lot of credit apps and a high GSP hour sales. She would overhear my pitch for cards required and then lie to the customer so they would apply. I would have to try and rectify what she said while she hovered over me. She did many other questionable things and I reported her multiple times, as did my coworkers and customers. Now, one time I got lucky and an 18-year kid came in. "Yo, buy the most expensive desktop we have on display, 2.5k. She saw me do this sale, but I needed a manager to approve a tiny discount, but my radio was dead. Coworker was watching me the entire time, so I asked if she'd call for the manager. She stone cold ignores me. I go for the manager. She prints out paperwork on the computer and tries to sell it to him. When I return, she literally yells at me in front of the customer to give her the sale. BC she worked too. I ignored her and didn't give her the sale. When I reported this, as did the customer, he was mortified. I was literally told by my boss, ignore when she does that, she's a middle child, so she does stuff like that. I was tired of the stupid lack of action, so I filed an hours complaint regarding her and 5 of my managers for not addressing it. They all got reamed for it. Only one is still in a management position. The rest were eventually demoted or laid off. Good on you. We need more satisfying ending stories in this thread. Out of curiosity, what was her commission percent? I wonder how much money it takes to get someone to act so shitty. I was raised in a cult. There were 11 kids with 4 moms, and the leader had really convinced our moms that he was the Archangel Michael. I tried to run away over and over in my late teenage years, hiking across the desert in the dark to get to the highway, where I would try to hitch a ride every single time. Well-intentioned truckers called the police to report a little girl walking along the highway with her thumb out. I'm short, and I had been malnourished my entire childhood. So even after I turned 18, I was underdeveloped and couldn't convince anyone I was an adult. Michael always called me in as a runaway and the cops would take me back. The last time I was 20, and I felt so hopeless when I saw the police lights. I thought very seriously about trying to attack the officer with my knife that I always brought in case I was picked up by a crazy person. I knew I was too small and weak to actually hurt the officer, but he would be obliged to arrest me and send me to jail. It was the only way out I could think of. Damn, I'm sorry to hear that. Did it work? I feel like a lot of us would be very interested in hearing your story on how you got out. Dumped at the doorstep of a youth shelter after my mum was hospitalized and dad was in prison. I wasn't a super bright teenager, but had enough sense to spend my last $20 on pepper spray and padlocks for my stuff. Predictably, people's stuff went missing all the time. I could write an essay on the issues in the public welfare system, ranging from the macro level lack of funding to the micro level incompetent or burned out staff. There was violence, substance use, and sexual assault in crisis accommodation. But what bothers me 10 years later is the sheer stupidity of some adults who are meant to guide at-risk teenagers. I would ask my social worker questions like, are there places which can help me with food this week? How do I write a resume? And that social worker would vaguely shrug and offer relaxation techniques and mindfulness strategies. Look, 3 people got arrested at this shelter last week. No amount of relaxation techniques are going to calm me down. I'm guilty of doing stupid and irresponsible things as a teenager, but eventually finished high school and then 3 university degrees. I actually work for the same system that I was and am disappointed in, And there are so many practical resources available they're underutilized because staff don't even know they're out there. If I had just a single adult to help me with the most simple tasks as a kid, it would have been so much easier. When you're a kid you just don't know how university loan applications, taxes, budgeting, etc works, or at least I didn't, and everybody assumes that you do because they do. Like I had no idea that in my country, the Department of Housing can pay for your rental bond. I stayed in a homeless shelter for an extra 1 to 2 months to save up $900 to pay for the bond of a shitty apartment. Extra months of broken sleep meant trying to pick the lock to my door. Residents hyped up on ice. Last year there was a 16-year-old girl on the train having a meltdown and making a public scene. She was clearly drunk and people were avoiding her. She started screaming that she missed her period and does anybody want to pay for her termination. She phrased it as a joke or a way to get money, which I did not give, but I guess she repeated it enough that I wondered if it was true. We got to talking and I referred her to a social service, downloaded a list of resources in her catchment area, and saved links and forms on her phone about how to arrange her own healthcare cards since she's over 15, so that she can visit a bulk billing GP on her own and get tested. In my country, the P test from a pharmacy is about $15, but a pregnancy blood test ordered by your GP is free. We discussed different options that her GP might outline and other things that might be helpful. I know as well as anyone else that it's not always that straightforward, especially with 30 patients in your caseload and juggling them with a million other priorities, but in the biopsychosocial framework of health, where biological, psychological, and social factors are proposed to impact physical and mental health, we severely underestimate the impact of social circumstances. We let these kids down all the time, and it's preventable. Thank you for caring. My best friend grew up in the system and the only reason he survived it was thanks to people like you, so thank you. I used to work in fast food and was the only person in the store that didn't smoke. Everyone else got to take a break to smoke, but since I didn't smoke, I wasn't allowed to. Eventually, I spoke to the owner about it and was rebuffed. So I went over their heads to the company board. Owner got his ass chewed out for rebuffing me, and I wound up getting a huge bonus my next paycheck, but when they discovered I reported them, I got fired immediately. Turns out they'd been violating company policy in food prep and storage. So I filed another report to corporate. Store got shut down for months and my former boss got fined 6 figures. When I managed a pizza place 20 years ago, I used to give non-smokers a Coke break to go drink a soda. It never seemed fair to me that the smokers would go fuck off for 10 to 20 minutes while everyone else worked, plus they always wanted to go smoke as soon as rush was over and it was time to clean. When I was a kid, my dad used to beat on me pretty often. When he was sober, I usually did something to deserve it. When he wasn't, it was just go time. One night I was 14, he got drunk, and when I got home from a girlfriend's place he cornered me and put a revolver to my head. He told me how worthless I was and that he would be doing me a favor by killing me. I didn't respond, I didn't move, I just waited for him to pull the trigger. Didn't he left my room and left the revolver on my dresser. As he walked out, I took the revolver and went out. I walked around my hometown, sat by the river and thought about all the ways I could get back at him for all the misery he caused my mother, sister, and I. I also considered doing the old Kurt Cobain, but that's not relevant. I took the weapon apart and threw its pieces in the river. No one's asked me about the gun, since it's probably still there. Edit. Holy shit, that blew up. Thanks for all the upvotes and awards, everyone. You were, and are, very strong to handle it by just tossing the weapon. I can absolutely attest to being around people who were love-starved and then subsequently self-sabotaging or otherwise destructive in a softer sense. If I have felt rejected, I have felt peace in sort of burning bridges to find myself. May the bridges you burn light the way forward. When I had been bullied constantly in 7th grade by 3 different kids, groups of kids, and the school showed so little interest in helping me. I was physically bullied, verbally mocked, humiliated in front of the other kids, and I was battered. When I finally took my mom's advice to make a scene the next time someone started throwing things at me, I did it. We were outside that day for PE, and while we were all sitting in lines at the Start of class, a kid in the line next to me started throwing pebbles at me. I ignored it for a moment. Then when he kept going I yelled at him to stop. I didn't care that people were staring. I wanted them to see that this average height, able-bodied boy was throwing things at me. A very small and disabled girl. The teacher came over and asked what happened. Kid told him they were only pebbles. He wasn't hurting me. The teacher agreed with him and told me if I ever disrupted his class like that again I was getting detention. I don't know what it is about some teachers, but the second they get put in charge of more than one child they become absolutely blind to any kind of bullying, and if it gets pointed out to them, they think that particular incident exists in a vacuum and couldn't possibly be a sign of anything worse. I was 11 years old and suicidal because I felt so incredibly powerless. That teacher only solidified that feeling. And that is why I tried to take a bat to school to bust some kneecaps. Thankfully my mom caught me and realized how bad it was and got me out, but not before bringing down hell on those teachers. She made even the principal freak out. Despite how angry I was, for some reason, I never thought about using my dad's guns, and I'll always be thankful for that. Deep down I think it was because I really didn't want to hurt anyone. I just wanted them to leave me alone. Edit. The bat was also one that was covered in foam, so really I was a dumb kid. I didn't grow up with the best family. There was a long period of time where there was constant fighting and things often went too far. I didn't feel safe in many different ways. It all culminated to a point when I was 17, disowned, and about to get kicked out. But my vindictive defensive actions in the past made my mother know that kicking me out wasn't a good idea. I know the only reason I could have a roof over my head was because my mom isn't a citizen, and she knew I would have reported her for the crime of child abuse, which did happen, which would have put her residency in jeopardy. So I guess I had to threaten to burn the village in order to feel the warmth of safety. Edit. A lot of people are assuming my mother is illegal, but she's not. I'm not exactly sure the mechanism through which she can stay in the United States, but she married my dad, American Ann. They got divorced. She can live and work here, but she doesn't have the full protection of the government like me. Threatened to burn the village in order to feel the warmth of safety. Thank you. I hope you have a good day. My family doesn't know that I've hit it. Begin my industry. The industry, they said that y'all need superhuman talent or a lot of luck to make it in and getting my finances and the logistics in order. And next week I'm moving out unexpectedly. The guys I've hired to move what few possessions I'm taking with me arrive sometime in the morning and my flight leaves in the afternoon. I'll leave a letter explaining that I haven't harmed myself, but they are not likely to see me for a long time. I've got my own phone on my own plan, a plane ticket, and a place lined up on the other side of the country. My family won't take it well, since they thrive on control and conflict, and I expect the whole family to implode from finger pointing and drama whoring once I'm gone. Good for you. I hope everything works out well for you. Call the local police and a sheriff's office and inform them of this. Don't give them any info about your new whereabouts. Other than that, it's intentionally far away. That way, if your family tries to file a missing persons report, law enforcement won't act on it. This is something that abuse survivors are encouraged to do, and it sounds like your situation qualifies. Grew up with an incredibly privileged but emotionally abusive family. I never really fit in. They would frequently gaslight me with so much, but one that made me feel like I was going crazy was that they all hated each other, but would act like I was the only one to fight with anyone else and band together in that. I've moved out now, but there were many nights when I felt like I was going crazy and that I could burn that house down and not look back. Glad I didn't though. Always a better way out. Edit. Wow, not a huge redditor. First comment I've had with any real engagement. It's nice to hear there's other people who've dealt with the same stuff and still surviving as well. Nice to know peeps aren't alone in it. Stay strong. Happy living. Working in public accounting as an auditor, 65+ hour weeks, getting yelled at by clients for things that aren't your fault, getting chewed out by your manager for being under budgeted hours for a client, staying in hotels 5 days a week during busy season, eating poorly because you never had time to cook. Let's just say one of the best days of my life was when I got laid off from that place, which opened the door for a great opportunity with none of the issues listed above. The time I was working at a psychiatric hospital and the seer assumed I smoked drugs. Because I had dreadlocks, I worked hard for those patients and they trusted me. I shielded the hospital from nearly weekly riots of patients. After being unfairly judged and made to look dispensable, I almost set the inmates loose on the asylum, but then I realized that it was selfish and those people I cared so much about would be punished for fighting my fight for me and basically would be the firewood for my fire. Just go on vacation for a month, then they'll know what you do for them. I actually have a story for this. So I was a senior that was friends with 4 juniors in a friend group. I wasn't exactly part of their group, but they seemed to enjoy my company. I was both the funny friend and the therapist friend. I helped them through their prom fiasco. When they were at odds with each other, I made them food on occasion at my graduation. They all said that we should get together as a group and do something fun and bonding before I left for college. One of them even says that she would plan a party for us all. A month passes by. I invite them all to see a movie one by one. They flake during the week before the movie. I end up going to see it alone. Another month passes, and they've maintained radio silence over the next few months. I try to invite them to various events, and without fail, none of them end up being available. I ask them about doing something together, and no dice. All the while, I watch their Instagram posts of going to a lake and having a lake party, or having a New Year's Eve party together. Now, here I am, typing this out on Reddit before going to bed and waking up tomorrow to go out of state for college. You'll get a lot of "they don't deserve you," or you'll make tons of new friends, etc. But the truth is, some people are just fucked up. Nothing you cold done world changed. That happens sometimes in friendships, it happens at work, and it sometimes happens in intimate relationships. The best way to protect yourself is by remembering that your friendship is valuable. If you see red flags early, give them some space. If they keep reaching out to you, they may be worth giving some extra time to. Congrats on school. Don't drink too much. Moved to a new town and started going to a new church. When dad got cancer, went to church and told the pastor to try and get advice. Pastor announced this to the convocation and also told everyone that some lady's horse was sick. Watched the entire convocation console this lady about her sick horse. The convocation was in tears about some sick horse. While my dad was dying, no one said a word to my family. Never been to church since. Oh, that's awful. I'm from the UK, so many of us are not brought up in any religion. But my friend was starting to go to our local church and she just received news that her boss's new baby, a few days old, had unexpectedly died. Totally distraught, she went to church and had a word with the vicar asking, could the baby be mentioned in the "please pray for" section of the service. She was appalled when the first question asked, was the baby Christian? As if any other baby would not be worth mentioning in the service when a clearly upset parishioner needed the support of the church at that time. She never went again. That's a badass proverb if I do say so myself, working in corporate. Hey there, so we see that you'd like to set corporate on fire. I'll be honest, champ, I always knew you had a drive to you deep down, but I gotta be honest, I don't know if wholesale fire is a deliverable we want to be focusing in on currently. We're currently spitballing here to really incentivize growth hacking, but the bottom line is that synergy and out of the box thinking has always been our wheelhouse. We can onboard similar strategy initiatives, sure, but I was really hoping you were paying more attention in seminar last week, because we really covered this stuff already. Burning to death in a screaming corporate inferno really doesn't demonstrate thought leadership, or that make it happen mindset we're holding as a central paradigm. The stacker holders just won't swing for perishing in cleansing waves of pure heat and light until skin literally boils and sloughs off its kinda low hanging fruit. When we're always striving for industry best practices by and large. Just keep these points on your radar going forwards, and remember, we're mostly interested in right sizing more than asphyxiating on chokingly thick smoke and passing out before the flames wrap around you like a smothering cloak of searing pain and numb whiteness. Speaking broadly about the market, we want to disrupt the space, but we can't go boiling the ocean every B2B brainstorm. Just keep working on that. 30,00 foot view, and we'll circle back tonight. Speaking of, we need you to stay in late, if that's okay. Perfect. See you then. When I was like 15 I got in a fight with my friend over something stupid. I went home and was shaking with rage, full on puberty meltdown anger. I was stomping up and down the hallway, breathing through my teeth all hard. At one point I went in the kitchen and got a knife and started talking to God like, forgive me for what I do to him. Lol fucking Nimrod. I'm embarrassed when I think about that. Lol, sometimes the op quote is a meaningful reminder for our compassion for others, and sometimes it's emblematic of all our fiery angsty teen hormone rage. Whenever I'm in a meeting and my suggestions are getting consistently ignored and I'm getting interrupted and talked over, I get the weirdest urge to prove I still exist by jumping on the table and busting out the Queen of the Night aria. Edit. There's a lot of good advice in the replies. I will say that in about 60% of my meetings this is never an issue, and in the other 40% it's an issue because of a few specific coworkers who resort to just yelling. If confronted politely, their managers have been made aware of this. Bring an air horn, then just continue talking as if nothing interrupted you. I cannot guarantee the success of this strategy. Already therapy is a magical thing where you learn to burn down anything that is bad for you and then you take it to your family. My family seems to be somewhat accepting of me burning down the stupidity that is hurting us all and leaving the nice things, though. In therapy now, and agree with you sadly, burning down the bad stuff has included my family. I'm happy you are better off today than yesterday. 16 years old, finally decided to fight back against abusive parents, only had to do it once to stop the physical abuse. The brain fucks kept happening. It's so terrible when the people that are supposed to protect you are your abusers. I'm so sorry you've had to live through this. The theater department at my college, despite building their entire persona on empathy, was the judgiest, cliquiest, least empathetic group of people I've ever known. If you weren't part of the in crowd, you weren't given the same support. There were many of us that existed on the outskirts, working so hard just to see the same few people get all the opportunities, even as far as being cast in lead roles after they graduated. As I struggled with depression, anxiety, and undiagnosed ADD, I worked tirelessly to keep up with my peers, only to be told I needed to apply myself more. I saw people put in half the work some of us did and end up with higher grades. One professor actually gave arbitrary grades to the 4+ HOURS of homework he assigned based on page counts and who he thought deserved a higher grade. I tried so hard to get no support in return that I became incredibly suicidal and had to take a semester off to deal with my mental health. It only took 2 more years and another medical break before I finally was able to graduate. I had a similar experience. The entire school was preparing for this huge musical. I was part of the tech crew, so sound, lights, etc. There was this one girl part of the clique who was the only nice one, especially to me. We met in private at times and she would text me a lot. Then in the week before the first show of the musical, she humiliated me by claiming she was just pranking me, showing others in front of me our private texts, and then admitting that she started to date one of my best friends already. I felt so destroyed. On the day she performed, I was doing the lights and another kid the sound. He had everything set up for the song and left for the bathroom. While she was about to start singing, I saw all the controls for her mic on the soundboard, and as she opened her mouth I slowly turned down her monitor speaker. For everyone who doesn't know, the monitor is just heard on stage by the singer. It's so that you can actually hear yourself sing with all the music etc next to you. Without, it's like singing while holding your ears closed. It will basically sound like you have no feel for tone, because without the monitor you don't. This was over 8 years ago. I'm still very good friends with the guy she actually dated. He told me she was really insane, the type to send death threats after him not texting back for 5 minutes after they broke up. Edit. Holy shit. My first awards earned for doing something mean back in school, and people said it won't matter later on. D. When I was in 7th grade, my parents got divorced. My anger and sadness continued to grow. One Thursday night, my father picked up my siblings for the obligatory meal out. I declined to go. I went into my room and started fucking around with my chemistry set. Picture this setting: a farmhouse built in 1830, burlap walls in my bedroom, hundreds and hundreds of comic books, and wall-to-wall carpeting your standard tinder box instead of using a Bunsen burner for my heat source. Get this, I used an empty plastic margarine container, and instead of practicing any other safety protocol, I set the fuel on the carpet and lit it. Surprise, the plastic melted almost immediately, and the fuel soaked the carpet. Before I knew what happened, flames were licking the walls and furniture. At this point I had the good sense to yell fire to my mother, who was blissfully unawares in the kitchen. She dialed 911, while the child genius ran in and out of the inferno trying to save his marbles and ECS. Thankfully the emergency services got there quickly and were able to contain the damage to my bedroom. It was completely blackened. For years I believed the whole thing was a terrible accident. Only as an older adult can I admit to one simple fact: my pain and need to be seen manifested in the torching of my own room. That last paragraph was poetic. How are you doing feeling now? Oh man, middle school for me. I was heavy bullied at school. Mentally and physically I wasn't getting any support at home, or felt like I was not in a good place then. I had so many negative thoughts of hurting others and myself. Thankfully I never had a gun, or I would have become one of those school shooters. That's how bad and deep in depression I was, and I ended up in a psych ward, and man, those places are terrible. I didn't get any help, but only learned to bottle my shit up more. Do you think you'll recover and be happy? My dad didn't seem to take any interest in my life since I was 4. Then when my mum left him and I told him I was going to leave, he then proceeded to do everything to get me to live with him, buying me stuff, telling me mum isn't a fit parent, trying to get custody in court. I decided to live with him because I was too scared to start a new school midway through the year. He then dates this woman who was pretty much the catalyst in destroying their marriage and gets mad at me when I don't treat her like a mother. Mum is now trying to get custody, and I would burn his house to the ground if it meant she would win. Just go and live with her. Refuse to go back. Your dad will have to go through the system to get you back. True, the cops might take you back to him once or maybe even twice, but ultimately if you are stubborn enough, the cops will refuse to do your father's bidding and tell him to take it to court. Trust me on this. Just go to your mum now. When I was a teenager living in rural Alabama, I didn't get along with my stepmother. She went out of her way to be as mean as she could to me. Once when she left the house, she took the mouse for the family computer with her, so I couldn't use it while she was gone. Well, I did her one better by taking a cord from the back, then locking myself in my bedroom until she got home. She uses my little baby stepsister against me and tells her to tell me she has a present for me. As soon as I unlock the door, stepmother yanks it out of my hand and starts screaming at me about why the computer won't work. Well, let me tell you, on both sides of me, I had a steel pole lying against the wall and a simple glass of water. I briefly entertained the notion of smashing her in the face with the pole and instead just chucked the harmless water in her face. I'm quite sure I avoided jail that night. My old job, a lot of people quit when I did feel survive, but the atmosphere isn't nearly as light anymore because all the fun people left except one, and now the turnover rate is ridiculously high. I always feel like a loser in school. I have friends, but end up alone 95% of the time. It's rough, dog. Hey mate, I've been there. It's gonna be okay. School is short. If you need to talk, PM me. My parents kicked me out to teach me a lesson after finding out I was B. Almost killed myself so they would understand what I was feeling in that moment. I'm glad you're still here. Going to the DMV. The flames licked higher and higher up the sides of the strip mall, smoke billowing out in dark, twisting columns to the grey sky above. You hold a gas can in your left hand and your expired driver's license in your right. In the picture, you hold an impatient, stressed out look, but in that moment, your face is split by a widening grin of satisfaction finally granted. You watch a beam collapse and fall in front of the door as the employees and patrons within panic and run about like chicken sans heads. They approach the collapsed beam and beg you for help. In that moment, you are in two places at once. You are in front of the DMV as it burns in a blazing conflagration. You are inside the DMV, and it is not on fire. You have been there for 3 hours and you have already missed an unmissable meeting. You're begging the clerk for help. If there's anything you can do, or she can do to help oil the gears a little bit. You're outside the DMV. and the fire's closing as DMV employees beg you to help them with the collapsed beam blocking the door. You're back inside the DMV, and the clerk is saying something unhelpful to you. You are outside the burning storefront, and your lips form the exact same words you heard all those years ago. Please take a number, and wait patiently. We'll try our best to make it quick. When the flames finally reach them, you're not certain if they're flailing in agony or dancing in an abject ecstasy, a celebrated freedom at long last from the banality of their jobs and that hellscape on earth. They slump back, spent in their jubilations, and are then one with the blaze until man and floor and roof, and expired licenses, and Form 716A and driver's ed books all return to ash hand in hand in a beautiful yet final ultimate act of unity. A peace falls over the lot, and a warmth settles in your heart. If I cannot inspire love, I will cause fear. I've never done this in real life, but definitely in video games from time to time. What's the matter? Somebody steal your sweet roll. Quick save. In middle school, I had a teacher who taught my favorite class, geography. I had maps in my room. I could recite all the countries and some capitals, and tell you a little bit about a lot of them. I was a starry, bright-eyed student looking to learn more, and she was a bore. She was sexist, rude, dry, and took zero interest in teaching. She would dismiss my questions in class, give us stupid assignments, and test us on topics we didn't learn in class. To make a long story short, she was no longer working at the school at the end of the year thanks to me. Burn. Mrs. Wait, tell us how she no longer works there. What went down? Dig in for a different kind of story than most in this thread. It's not about me, it's about someone I used to know. Growing up, I was part of a huge diverse friend group, people from different schools, different small towns or walks of life. Something I feel really fortunate for. One of these guys, let's call him Big Bob, was part of our group for years and years. He came from a tough family. Never had any money, but honestly, he brought the energy to the party. One of those guys always talking, bombastic, good with jokes and memes and references. So collectively, those of us who had the means found a way to help him along. Since we did enjoy his company and this worked for years, we'd drive him home, help sneak him into the movie theater, share food and alcohol with him. However, as he got older, he started to develop sticky fingers. At first it was candy bars at the cash register, then it was a red piece of clothing from a store head stuffed down his shorts, then it was portable hard drives and the Best Buy bathroom. Eventually he got caught by the law, which seemed to stifle things for a minute. But then he moved to doing things where the law wouldn't catch up to him. You'd find games wouldn't be returned in a timely manner. Then eventually we found out he had sold an old Xbox and games that someone had loaned him. After they bought the new Xbox 360, we wanted to have a big LAN party and wanted another system. And that's how we found out that he had sold it for petty cash. He never told anybody. This continued. Little things would just go missing again and again and again. Eventually, I went off to college and he didn't, but those who also didn't go to college, you would still hear stories from. Eventually it reached a boiling point, and one of the friends in the group confronted Big Bob. One who had been stolen from Bob denied it all to his face, and we ostracized him. I know he was in that place. He had a bit of a temper, and I've seen him lose it before and smash his phone on the concrete. I know for a fact he felt like burning the house down after that confrontation night. Nothing actually ever happened, but growing up with him for 10 years, I'm sure it was a whirlwind that night. But at the end of the day, it was deserved. We tried to make him part of the village, or at least I hope I did. My brother is 10 years younger than me and is a teenager. I regularly drive him around to see his girlfriend and to his classes. Recently has becoming very disrespectful and downright rude. Has only nice to me if I've made food or if he needs a ride, and in a way that pisses me off even more. The amount of times I have seriously considered pulling over and making him walk the last 10 miles home. You shouldn't drive him around. Just don't drive him around if he's disrespectful. Whenever I go camping or to a bonfire party without a total fire ban, I nearly had a stroke reading your username, but man, I relate. The total fire ban in Australia means camping and parties aren't the same as they used to be. I'd say that applies extremely well to school shootings in the United States. The day my son was born, right there at the hospital, my girl dumped me for the rich Saudi Arabian neighbor of ours. Lord knows how long they humpin'. Pretty sad, but I have my son out the deal. Or is he? Hahaha. All in all, they are still a couple. 12 years later my son is grown little man that I raised 1 day a week visits and or online Skype. Had the gas, had the matches, my son's smile made me put it down, stay humble and try enjoy life. I became a loner, video game playing loser. Well, I'm a pretty good player actually, but a loser in life. Pretty much been 12 years and never had another girlfriend till recently. Dated for 1 month and she said I have to be Jehovah's Witness if I want to be her boyfriend. I wish to make this year a change, please. Wish me good positive energy so I can have the strength to be more willing to engage with life. Edit. Wanted to add that I was a PADI certified scuba diver before I met my son's mother and then I stopped. I will try start that hobby this summer instead of video games. Here in Australia, the fire starts itself. IF20 spent several months in a mental institution. I was a young teen when I was first admitted. The staff were extremely abusive to most patients, although certain ones were spared due to their meek behavior. One time, I was tricked into admitting to an infraction that I had never committed, and I was forced to stay in my room for several days on end. I attempted to file a complaint, but it never really went anywhere. The staff were typically very unkind, and they treated each patient as though they were a burden. I was very lonely, and I sank even deeper into depression. I kept my head down for several months, until I was eventually released. As an adult, those months in the ward still haunt me. I struggle with feeling worthwhile, and I criticize myself for the smallest things, because the hospital conditioned me into nitpicking and punishing myself for not being perfect. I have picked up the phone numerous times, trying to work up the courage to call the head of the hospital and give him a piece of my mind, but I've never been able to go through with it. Wouldn't give me my stapler. I said I was gonna do it. I told him, it's my stapler. Life and public accounting. I was heating up bread for 1 minute 50 seconds too long. At this time now my desire to leave my country and renounce my citizenship gets stronger day by day because of all the shit I see in my government down to the people. I'm already late to this party, but there was a point in life where I thought it was going to be my duty to take some shit down people, places, and things, and myself thereafter of course saw the world as a very dark place. And in that same period of time, I found myself rescuing a needy abandoned puppy, which led me to learn just how beautiful things can be with just a little help. A second chance. Again, help, not hurt. The person who thought that died some time ago. The pup, although now a senior dog, is still alive and well, and I've moved on to provide some really good opportunities for some very disenfranchised folks. And I have a chance happening to credit for it. Did you just make that up and then attributed it to Africa, the continent? I bless the sayings down in Africa. A European proverb says a boy takes a line from Black Panther and posts it here without even thinking. Where in Africa? Almost my entire adult life with spaces in between. I've been self-immolating for 20 years. Bullied in middle and high school, relentlessly, and occasionally violently. Administration turned their backs on me when I needed help, but was always there to come down on me like a ton of bricks. When I made the smallest mistake, became a loner, went from a straight A student to failing nearly every class. I felt betrayed and abandoned by everyone I trusted to help me at that school. The undiagnosed mental illness didn't help things either. If I had access to weapons back then, I probably would have been a statistic. Luckily this was 20 years ago, and I've gotten help through counseling and medication. I've seen this proverb pop up a lot on Reddit. I feel like it's some bullshit someone said online once, and they were like, oh, it's from Africa. Complete apathy during most of my elementary years. It was always burning, since the world's been turning. When I worked for a bank. What happened there, if you don't mind me asking? In grade school all of my classmates were either hostile, judgmental, uncaring, manipulative, or some combination of them. The teachers didn't even help, and some of them even tried to bully me into thinking I was stupid. I tried talking to older and younger classes sometimes, but that would only cause more bullying. My parents didn't help me either. Their only advice was uselessly preaching about obedience and waiting. It's far in the past and doesn't really affect me anymore, but if I ever bear or adopt kids I'll try to give them the guidance which I received way too late. Anytime I'm forced to deal with American Christians. Why American? Just wondering. I did start the fire, but it almost hurt people I loved, so I put it out. I just never regretted starting it. Right now can't seem to catch a break, feeling up to here with everything, experienced some debilitating sickness. That pain, combined with mental pain, rage, and anguish from loss in 3 short months, led to me attempting to bust out an unbreakable window, fractured my elbow alone in the year, haven't eaten solid food in weeks, losing my patience, lost all my energy, sending kind notes to strangers on the internet is the only thing keeping me going. Please don't shed a tear, I just need to vent. My last year in the Navy I stopped working and basically did the absolute lowest possible minimum, the most microscopic step above doing absolutely nothing. I left early to lunch and came back late as shit. Some days I showed up to morning mist late on purpose. I was a second class E5, equivalent to a sergeant in the Marine Army. The only thing I gave a shit about was training my juniors. I tried to give as much training as I could before I left. I didn't notify my watch coordinator that they took me off the watch bill, so I didn't stand a single watch in a year and a half. Deployment was fantastic without a watch. My chain of command didn't give a flying fuck if I went the extra mile because the shop was being run smoothly, no overdue jobs, we were all qualified, and a very tight team. They sure as fuck noticed when I stopped giving a shit. They took away my supervisor responsibilities and gave them to another second who was lower in rank to me by time and grade, and I basically became an overpaid E3, as if that was any kind of punishment. I was doing even less work. I had to sweep floors and clean the machines. Lol. I'm not proud of the way my career ended. I admit I could been much more mature about it, but I was in a really bad place mentally. I'm not an innocent victim, but I'm not the bad guy either. We lose a lot of good people in the military simply due to horrible toxic leadership. In my whole shop, only 2 people re-enlisted out of 12. Some light tragedy in a broken home. What you'll call no touch abuse. I wasn't struck. I wasn't sexually abused, but a lot of other bad stuff. So I never felt like I could be myself. Had to be different people for different people. I had no control. There was no joy or hope in my life, except my friends and adult siblings who tried to keep me sane. I was on some national merit scholar type radars, and I felt like I would be able to lie properly to the investigators without googling their process, which would be recorded. If only we'd had taught to go with that Nitzero, it'd probably be a murderer. I eventually aged out and found happiness and success, so don't worry about me. Side note, I was born in Hawaii, but the family moved on before I went to kindergarten. Still, when you're in Hawaii, I'm told you're kind of everyone's baby. They ask to pick up the baby, pass around the baby, coo and smile at the baby, and that seemed to affect me deeply in a good way. The village embraced me. Almost seems like the theme of Joker. This proverb is exactly how 4chan turned into a Stormfront enclave. I feel like a total outcast in the town I currently live in. I live on the side of town that the apartments are on. Anyone lives in the houses that they bought in the 200 housing bust and have lived in ever since, while the value tripled, quadrupled. I'm about 10 years younger than them and had no such opportunity. I used to wait tables at a local cafe on a side of town where I didn't really know anyone, but occasionally people from my area would come over and they'd look at me with pity, like they were so much better. I've given up on making new friends because the people who will talk to me apartment dwellers, not the house people, will end up moving away. One of my self-indulgent daydreams is to buy a house in the obscenely wealthy part of town and blast music all day, have car frames on cinder blocks out front, and bring property value down and make everyone miserable. My husband started talking about our town recently, and I abruptly blurted out, "I hope it burns down." He laughed and said, "Welp, you're the emotional barometer of the family, so I guess I hope it burns down too." I have been abused by my mother from as long as I remember until I was able to leave when my parents divorced at 16. One day when I was 15 or 14, I had enough. I had planned to kill my mother in her sleep. I knew I would have had a lesser sentence because I was under 16 and abused. I had taken the knife and waited until everyone was asleep. When it was probably time or thought hit me, what if I miss and she doesn't die? She would argue I'm unstable and no abuse had ever happened. She would also probably kill me if I missed. I knew she was capable of it. Strangely, the thought of getting killed by her was more upsetting than suicide, because at least I would be in control of my life. Anyways, I haven't seen her in 6 years, and I plan on continuing that way while rebuilding myself. Edit. Spelling. Trump was elected because rural America has been getting fucked for 50 years and told to like it. They didn't elect him to fix their lives. They elected him to throw a Molotov through America's window. Right now my parents don't accept me as trans. My dad's a know-it-all. My mom is minimally transphobic. And I live in America, where HRT is expensive as fuck. Within a few months as a teenager I was arrested for selling drugs, went to jail, and was put on probation, all the while my parents were having a nasty divorce and being kicked out of school not for drugs. I mean, did you go to high school? Sounds like a made up proverb someone ascribed to Africa, so it seems more legit. I work in video production. I worked in a shithole of a small business in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania. Soonish after college things were going fine until one day I was on Facebook and saw that a friend I went to school with was celebrating a new job they got. The company was the same as mine. So was the job title. I called my boss. He said I wasn't supposed to find out that way. Didn't apologize. I was fired. Effective immediately. For vague reasons there's not much of a job market in rural Pennsylvania for someone in my field. I spent the next 8 months collecting unemployment and applying to jobs out of state. I forced myself to apply to 10 jobs per week. Even if I was unsure about them, I was fucking furious. I wanted out. 2.5 years later, and am working and making triple the salary and loving my job and the people I work with. Sounds like a proverb about school shootings, lol. I think this applies. My family rejected me, so then my closest friends become my family. You know, like friends are the family you choose. And now my family is surprised they're not included in my future plans at all, and I prioritize them less during holidays. TLDR, the mental health system in the US is completely effed. One day when I was 19, I was at work and suddenly a police officer was there to arrest me. He took me in cuffs to a local hospital psych ward. The doctor immediately told me to take this cocktail of drugs, that I could take them voluntarily, or he'd get a court order to take them. I had no idea what was happening, and complied. The drugs put me in some kinda comatose state where I felt loopy and had a hard time following anything, much less complicated court proceedings. I learned someone filed some paperwork against me and they could hold me 72 hours, but since a weekend was in there it was really 5 days before I went to court to find out what the F was going on. The doctor never interviewed me. He went off what was in report and prescribed based on that 5 days of unnecessary cocktail drugs, and being a naive 19 years old, I didn't care what was happening nor what things meant in court. I was placed on a 6-month commitment and shipped off to some group home to live and be monitored. The doctor would change his diagnosis every 6 months, from one condition to another. That made no sense, and anyone suffering from these afflictions would never have, but that's how the US system works. The doctor's theory is the gold standard. No one questioned. 6 months was extended to a year to 2, and then eventually 3 years. When I was finally released I tucked my tail and ran. I didn't complain or risk any way of getting sucked back into their system. Turned out that my very strict Catholic parents filed a report that I was a danger to myself or others because at 19 I had rejected them and was rebellious entertaining Satanism. They told me they gave me to God when I was born, and since I had rejected him I had to be very sick. Obviously they lied to PPL under their belief they were doing the right thing. I lost my job, my car, my apartment, all my belongings, and 3 years of my life. I had never committed any crimes, nor shown any signs of violence, yet I was imprisoned for 3 years, and now, 20 years later, the effects of being force-fed a cocktail of unnecessary drugs has had long-term side effects on my health and body. Yay, thanks mom and dad. Boarding school, Catholic boarding school. I'm convinced now more than ever that Reddit is a confession booth used by government to use against its citizens' data mining. Have you ever stolen anything? When did you commit a crime? What's your deepest, darkest wishes? What crimes are you thinking of committing? Tell us about your family history. Post a picture of yourself. Like and subscribe for good luck, you handsome gentleman.